Over here, I have my NOCO Places 2050 mini that's happening right now. So they're doing jam boards, so I can jump off for a little bit. Well, welcome everyone. This is, we're calling our meeting to order for the Colorado Forest Health Council Legislative Committee. I welcome you all. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shack-McNally, chair of this committee, and I will ask Courtney to do roll call, please.
Yeah, definitely. Samantha Albert.
Present.
Hi, Samantha. Christy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Good morning, Christy. Katie McGrath Novak. Pat Dorsey.
Good morning.
Good morning, Pat. Director McCombs.
Good morning, all.
Hi, Director. Commissioner Jody Shack-McNally.
Present.
Good morning. Mark Morgan. Hi, Mark. See you there. We're just doing roll. Julie Stencil said she'd be joining us late today. Sullivan White Skunk. And Commissioner Medina. Okay, so we do have enough for quorum, and it looks like we have a few guests with us from the Nature Conservancy and the Gates Family Foundation.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Sorry, I think I lost you. Here we are. First we need to approve the minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? Have any questions or concerns, additions, or edits? Okay, I will welcome a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll move.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and then I see Katie McGrath has joined us now. So thank you all. So now we'll move on to our special guest to continue our discussion about some recommendations from the Gates Family Foundation. And I want to welcome again Whitney to our conversation and to our meeting, and appreciate your time. We've had you twice, or actually almost, is it 3 times now? But I just want to thank you for coming and providing this information, and we're so interested in the work that you're doing. So I'll just turn this over to you now. And then if everyone would just raise your hands, I will try to moderate how we have questions, since we have a tight agenda today. I also want to make sure we have enough chance for everyone to ask their questions. So just let me raise your hand and we'll manage those. But Whitney, go ahead and I don't know if you have a screen to share or if you just want to start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Whitney Johnson, Senior Program Officer for Natural Resources at the Gates Family Foundation and part of the Colorado Mass Timber Coalition. And just want to start by saying thank you for the invitation again, and I hope we can continue these as our coalition, continues to develop ideas and work around what we're trying to do. And a real quick time check. What is my allotted time, just to make sure?
I think you're mostly we do have a legislative update. So I think we said 25 minutes. Courtney,
Okay.
does that sound right, Courtney?
Yes, that's right.
But want to check. Okay. So, and I just want to start also with a caveat that I think I explained last time. This coalition is just getting started. And, we officially launched we've been having conversations for a year, Gates Family Foundation and parties across the state and across the region, across the world actually. But the coalition just started officially in September was our launch. And so I just want to make a note that as I'm going to share a few policy ideas that I've sourced from the coalition, that these are just seeds and the work is just getting started across our work streams and across the coalition. And again, I just want to open it up to you all too. If you have ideas or if you know of policy ideas that would be relevant to us, to please also share that with us. And I'd be happy to, we have an executive committee now. If anybody from the Forest Health Council wants to join us for one of those meetings and talk about your work and any relevant policy, that would be great.
I would.
Okay, that'd be awesome. So again, I hope this is a dialogue and a conversation as the coalition is getting started. So there are at least 5 potential areas that we might dig into as a coalition, and I'm going to go through the 5 with 1 or 2 examples and potential opportunities in regards to the Mass Timber Coalition and the work we're doing. So number 1 is either mandated or recommended specification for use of wood products in the built environment. So that has primarily, when we looked at other examples of this, that's been applicable to public construction projects. For example, British Columbia, which I had mentioned last time on the call, they require wood as a primary building material in all new provincially funded buildings. France also has a requirement now that just went into play maybe 2 years ago, requiring 50% timber in public buildings. The city of Emeryville, California has a new regulation that assigns development bonus points to mass timber construction in the planning process. So I think we're looking at the opportunity of, could Colorado do this, either mandate or provide incentives and make a preference for fiber sourced from Colorado for new public buildings like schools and government offices. I think in the near term, it would probably still mean that we're importing wood from other places, but the sustainability benefits would be realized right away. But long term, it would really stimulate the local mass timber industry. Number 2 would be, this is around code barriers. So removal of code barriers that would enable more uptick of mass timber buildings. This is where a lot of mass timber building projects stall out right now in the United States, is because there's just a lot of, it's such a nascent industry that there's a lot of education and work that has to be done to educate municipal authorities about safety requirements and timber projects in the concept design. Georgia has passed a bill prohibiting local governments from imposing height restrictions on mass timber. And the city of Denver actually has been an early adopter and is known across the US for approving 2021 building codes into their 2019 plans, allowing mass timber buildings to be built at a higher level, 18 stories. And we also know that the Wildfire Code Council is rewriting state WUI building codes now. So we've talked about that being a potential opportunity. Number 3, on the supply side of things, investments around construction projects, research and development, and forest management. As I mentioned on the last time we were together, we had a guest at our executive committee join us, Marcus Kaufman, who's with the Oregon Mass Timber Coalition, and he's with the Oregon Department of Forestry. They received a $41 million US EDA Build Back Better grant that is focused on accelerating mass timber applications in affordable housing, production, providing jobs, rural economic development, and all centered around restoring forest health. And I'll note that our forest resources work group is having its first working session in a week or a couple weeks. And so I think, we'll hear from that working group about other policy ideas. One other thing from Marcus that he talked about was some of these projects where there are 20-year stewardship contracts. And so thinking about, because when we talk to sawmill owners and operators, that is kind of the biggest hurdle, is getting a long-term supply. And so there are some projects around the US, they're calling them A to Z projects, where they've got these long-term contracts. They do, they're increasing the scale and the pace of the restoration projects, and they're using third-party NEPA contracting to increase the efficiency as well. So, and on the research side, there's potential opportunities there about new value add products suited to Colorado fiber feedstocks and the regional wood product demand. The fourth bucket is demand activation. So think of like roadmaps, advisory councils. They're all over the place. There's a lot of those plans out there. Some really great with that. The BC Mass Timber Action Plan, again, is one I shared with Courtney, I think. And it's just a great example of developing mass timber as an economic sector, maximizing mass timber's benefits for people and a low carbon future. And there, in that bucket, thinking about state level grants to companies and institutions that might invest in wood products manufacturing or add to capacity that already exists in the state. And then the fifth one falls under the topic of decarbonization approaches. So whole building life cycle assessment mandates. We know that those often point to wood products as a low climate solution. And we've seen signals of policy shifts towards considering embodied carbon in buildings. There was just a law passed, it's not even in place yet, in California. They're the first state to adopt measures dealing with embodied carbon, and they've changed their buildings codes to limit embodied carbon emissions in commercial and school buildings to start off, and then they're going to look at smaller footprint buildings. And that's going to go into effect in August of next year. So it's the first state in the nation to implement required embodied carbon reductions in buildings. So, and we think there's going to be a trend towards that as the operations of buildings become more efficient and less carbon intensive. Then people are going to be looking at what goes into the buildings, what they're built with, how those materials are extracted. And
Whitney, can I pause you right there? I think Christy had her hand raised. Christy, did you want to ask your question now? Do you mind, Whitney, if I've?
No, not at all, please.
Christy,
that was my last point. And I just want to say too, that I can share some of the plans and the other things I've referenced. I'll share that with Courtney when we're done.
I think that'd be great. I think there's some things I was trying to Google quick that you were talking about. I would love to see.
Okay.
So I think, Christy, you want to go ahead and repeat your question?
Sure. Sorry about that. I
No.
thought to raise my hand, then I figured I'd just type it in the chat. Whitney, can you explain? I don't know what embodied carbon is.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Thanks.
Yep. Embodied carbon are the emissions that go into a building, the entire lifespan. So think of everything from, like if we're thinking of mass timber, everything from extracting the timber to the manufacturing, to the construction, the maintenance, and the demolition. So the whole, and then when you think about operational carbon and emissions there, it's what it takes to heat and cool, that kind of thing. And so embodied carbon is what it takes to build a building, the materials and the process.
And the embodied carbon does not include operational carbon?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes, Whitney, one comment you made there, or one point was your long-term contract or stewardship contract.
Yeah.
That is a big concern of industry, but it's not. Long-term contracts generally for supply have stewardship contracts have been kind of a trail of tears, and they've not been very successful.
Mm.
What industry is really looking for is a long-term commitment by the agencies to put up a source of timber. The contracts don't have to be long-term. The commitment has to be long-term.
Okay.
And then let the free market system work. And that's a pretty important distinction to industry. In the past, a lot of public agencies have felt that the goal was to put up these 10 and 20-year contracts. Most of the time, those have been very, very unsuccessful.
Okay.
The key is to get long-term commitments from the different management agencies for a program. Long-term program, yes. Long-term contracts, not so much.
Okay.
Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Christy? And then Rob after that.
Whitney, you noted that, this is very new, and it seems, it's interesting to me. Is it less expensive generally to build with mass timber, or does it add to the costs? Yeah, that's my question.
That's a great question. And my answer is it depends. What I hear from everybody in the industry is that when you think about, if you're a developer, when you think about using mass timber, you have to start at the very beginning of the design process, because most of this is modular. And so, when it gets set up on a site, it goes up kind of like a Lego set or something. And you have to think about this from the beginning. Where you can see savings is that because of the modular aspect of it, it shaves off the amount of time it takes to build a building by, depending on the size of the project, months. And so when you think about it holistically, yes. We just toured, our coalition just toured the Colorado's first and only mass timber. Well, it's a mix, it's a hybrid, but they have mass timber elements in a large part of the school. And it included a huge roof and beams. And they said it went up in 2 weeks and shaved, what normally would have taken 2 months to install, took 2 weeks. So you have to, when you think about it holistically, yes, although, that's one of the things our group is going to look at too, is the different, what kind of mass timber products are suitable and most economical for different case studies.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And Rob?
Thanks so much, and great great overview, Whitney. Thank you very much for that. I was curious, and this may be more of a question for Director McCombs, but the statewide biomass assessment that State Forest Service is conducting right now, whether that would have some bearing on the long-term supply issue. I was in an Upper South Platte partnership meeting yesterday, and Tim Reeder was on that from the State Forest Service and described a little bit about that process. And I believe he said the assessment itself would be out in early 2024. So I'm just curious if that would come into play as it relates to the long-term supply piece.
Yes, and I'll let Matt answer that, but we can't wait for that to come out, because I do think it's going to inform the coalition's work. But Matt, if you want to speak.
Yeah, I would think that, Rob, to that point, I think it's going to be influential in where we cite and sort of explore all utilization modalities that we might want to invest in or encourage in the state. So that report is tentative, I would say, like somewhere between January and February. They're in the final stages of review and getting ready to start building out the sort of communication plan and the launch plan associated with that. But there's a lot of folks that are, as you can imagine, very interested to see how that data is represented and what opportunities and or barriers come from the findings. But Amanda and her team and Dr. Mackinson are busily moving through the final edits and trying to get it ready for launch here at the early winter stage.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm excited as well. I think it holds a lot of promise. And I do think the point on citing is going to be really important. So thanks for working that in as well, Matt.
You bet.
Mr. Morgan.
Just a quick comment. I'm really excited about where exactly the source for mass timber is going to come from, because much of our fuels problem in the Front Range here is in ponderosa and Doug fir, primarily ponderosa pine, and much of the of the lodgepole species in the state, and some of our spruce already has a fairly strong market, even in small diameter wood. And so I'm really excited to see about the appetite for mass building for small diameter ponderosa pine.
Yeah.
And I hope that you've got people in that if you can find a market for small diameter ponderosa pine, Doug Pert, you're going to go a long ways towards solving Director McCombs' fuels problems. And so somebody needs to be looking at that difference, I guess, is all.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. There's a group in Oregon that we've had conversations with called the Tallwood Design Institute. And they're based, I think, Matt, you might know this, I think they're associated with Oregon State University. And they do applied research, focus on mass timber, and are looking at everything from beetle kill to small wood and different species. So we've been leaning on them too.
One comment there is that research being done there in Oregon? Because you will find that Oregon small diameter ponderosa pine is a very different beast than Front Range Colorado ponderosa pine. So if you're going to tap those guys, I hope they're doing their homework out here.
Yeah, we're not that far down the line. We just know that they're a potential resource. And we've been looking at their research.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you, Whitney. I'm going to go in order. So Christy Belton's next, and then Commissioner Medina.
Thank you. A couple other quick questions. Whitney, building a little bit on what Mark Morgan was talking about. So do you guys, basically with the whole framework of mandates, you mentioned that you guys are talking about maybe some mandates versus incentives. So if some mandates come into play, do you think that we have enough of a supply of the quality or the type of wood that you guys need in order to meet those mandates? Or will that create sort of a super big challenge for builders and for public entities, and then again, drive up the cost? How do you think that the supply melds with the word mandate?
Yep, it's a great question. I think short term, we see it as, incentivizing and reducing barriers for mass timber construction. And like I said, it would probably mean imported fiber in the beginning. And then as that demand continues to grow, and as we're working, as the coalition and other partners and organizations are working on these other work streams of looking at workforce and looking at housing and trying to understand where the fiber is, what species and what it's suitable for. As those work streams are developing answers and getting smarter about these things, then the hope is that we would be able to, either expand and invest in mills here, or, bring somebody in to do the manufacturing and milling. So short term, we'd probably still be importing the mass timber components, and then but long term, the hope would be that the demand would incentivize the actual, manufacturing and milling to be done here with fiber from Colorado.
Thank you.
And
Matt,
maybe,
what are you going to say? Yeah.
I just want to augment that really quick, Commissioner. So I have always said, and I'll continue to say, that there's also a regional component here, and that the siting in the sort of Front Range area with our transportation infrastructure that already exists is another one of the benefits. And there's supply potentially is, along the rail corridors. And if you look at sort of the rail transport model that Turkey Federation is helping move forward with U.S. Forest Service, it's really about getting fiber in the Intermountain West and Coastal West to the places where it could be high, sort of its highest and best uses, and keeping that milling infrastructure either in place or helping facilitate develop it. So just for folks' edification, when I think about this project and this opportunity, I really do think about what's the regional impact that we could have here in Colorado, meeting Colorado's needs, but also being an outlet, a recipient, of treatment related fiber that would come from Wyoming forest, that would come from New Mexico forest, that would come from Utah forest, places where we know we have access to those markets. And again, this is sort of long-term, but just we're having those conversations regionally as state foresters in the Intermountain West about sort of, where do we want to potentially leverage our singular ambitions to benefit a regional hub that could help reduce everybody's costs when it comes to wildfire mitigation, forest health treatments. And it's exciting to hear in the preliminary conversations we've had sort of regionally, there's a stomach for having these places be in the right location and not overwhelm the supply that exists, right? If we're all chasing the same opportunity, it becomes quickly very difficult to meet any of the ambitions. And so just some awareness there that we're absolutely taking a hard look at what Colorado's supply can look like, and certainly thinking regionally as we think about how much and what kind of, how much fiber there is and how much of a scale we want to build to, or at least consider at the outset here.
Thank you, Director. So I'm going to go in order again, so that Commissioner Medina, and then I'm going to read Pat Dorsey's question, and then Julie Stencil. Thank you.
Good morning. I guess it's morning still. I don't know what time it is. It feels like I've already
Friday,
been
at
in
least.
meetings. So my apologies because I missed the first part of the conversation because I was trying to wrap up something else. But just speaking to what Whitney was talking about the timber, mass timber, locally here in Pagosa, we have a business that is they have the machine that does the Lego log building type. They've just acquired that, and some of the obstacles, if you will, that they are running into is what we're talking about, is where to get that timber, how to do it. Biomass, people don't seem to understand what biomass is, but it's important. And then also talking about the transportation piece, because I think that is one of the biggest inhibitors for this particular individual that's trying to do this locally, is having that transportation, because a lot of times from Archuleta County, that timber is taken and it's transported elsewhere because the transportation is coming from the bigger, the Front Range. And my understanding is, just from the locals here, again, Archuleta County, a very narrow view, is the timber that is available to help do the mass timber construction, if you will, is definitely available here. It's being able to access it, and to access it through the forest is where the biggest challenge is. And so we're working that through at a local level, but I hear it even on a bigger level. So I don't know if that adds or deters what we're talking about, but I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. And I think, to just reiterates, like, to Matt's point too, that we're thinking about, what's the logical when it comes to rail and, big highway corridors versus a more regional approach. Like there's a group down in Durango too, the Timber Age. Yeah. And they, they're sourcing timber from a 50-mile radius, but they're working with private landowners. So they've got a different model. But transportation is definitely a huge factor in
even with that, so it's Redstone Timber Frames here in Archuleta County, who works really closely with Timber Age in Durango. They're even talking about doing the wood insulation, which we all met on Wednesday, because we were talking about the wood innovation grants and things like that. So, but that's also something that is very relevant. Not that we've seen it much here in Southwest Colorado, but it's definitely something that's happening.
And that just made me think of the other thing we're talking about is, a model where it could be a wood campus, and where all these different materials can be taken off of the forest
Yep.
during the
And that's exactly what this individual is trying to do here in Archuleta County, is trying to create a wood campus.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
And that's something that we are looking at in Larimer County, along with being near a rail spoke and a major power provider. So just so Larimer County's, as Director McComb has learned, we're starting to be able to talk. I mean, I've been hinting at this, but we're starting to talk about this pretty emerging technology main campus idea. So we're that's progressing. So I want to read Pat's question real quick.
Okay.
And then Julie Stencil, thank you, Julie, for being so patient. Is there a potential with the mass timber community to support federal policies like LEED specs, et cetera? You know, the LEED, the
Yeah.
energy rating.
And let's see, is it potential? Yes, I don't see why not. And I will say, you know, there are these other coalitions that exist around the United States. We are talking about kind of developing a community of practice. And one of the ideas is, can we elevate federal policies, you know, as a collective? So that would be something on the radar for sure.
Thank you so much. Julie, thank you for your patience.
Of course. Thank you, Commissioner. Whitney, thank you for your presentation, and my apologies that I had to be late. So I missed the first part of it. So this may not make sense. I'm just gonna caveat that. But when you were speaking toward the end of your presentation, one of the things that popped into my brain was when you were talking about how this can quickly enable construction to pop up in a way that perhaps it wouldn't before, right? So there are some maybe cost benefits there. I was just curious if anything about this material and its benefits to enable quick construction is something that the city of Denver is looking at in their, you know, in their initiative to quickly create housing for the homeless. Is there any synergy there that folks maybe in the city aren't talking about that should be?
I hope so. This coalition has 5 work streams that we're, you know, trying to get smarter about, like forest resources and demand development. And one of those 5 buckets is affordable housing. And trying to, because these buildings go up so fast, if we can get the right mix of species to mass timber product to line it up with the economics, the hope, because Gates Family Foundation has a focus also on affordable housing, among other things. And and I will say that Oregon Mass Timber Coalition and their $41 million EDA Build Back Better grant is largely focused on affordable housing and setting up manufacturing, a manufacturing site and cranking out, Matt, you might remember the number, cranking out like 800 units a year or something. So that obviously learning from them as well, but there is a lot of hope there.
Thank you. Great question, Julie. So we're about ready for time. Any other big questions? And then I'm sure, Whitney, we really appreciate you forwarding all that information. This has been really a fantastic conversation and great information. I really appreciate your time. And really, I don't know if I'm speaking for the group, but I think we appreciate this ability to have kind of a collaborative a dialogue back and forth, and certainly we can have this as an agenda item as people read and look, and we can send back some feedback. I don't know, colleagues, thumbs up. Does that sound like something we could kind of look at that and send back some feedback? Everybody, we can kind of make that document.
That would be great. Oh,
okay,
that'd be great.
So let's do that so we can bring back some feedback and we can have a discussion at the next meeting. So let's add that to the agenda items. So thank you, Whitney. You're welcome to stay. We're going to talk about the legislative update upcoming for this, not today. That's why I keep looking over. We have a special session that's impacting county government. So that's why I keep looking, is like, okay, what's the latest? And so we appreciate so much your time, and we wish you a really wonderful Thanksgiving.
Yes, you too. And I'd love to stay, but I have to jump. But I did read, I'm reading your minutes now, so I'll catch up via the minutes. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. Okay. Courtney, I believe the next item is just to have that legislative question about seeing if we can, we had talked about this at the full Forest Health Council meeting, and there is no, thank you, Director McCombs, as he's gone off, the Colorado State Forest Service has been very generous and very, very cool about reimbursing for travel and food and for our last two meetings. And, that cannot be sustainable long-term. And so this, as we have learned, that the legislative, for the Colorado Forest Health Council really was created, but with no budget. And if we want to continue to do like field trips and have food at our meetings and things like that. And so we had asked about a question. I was ready to make a motion right there, like, hey, let's ask a legislator for some funding, but we probably need to have an idea what that looks like. And so I thought we should have that discussion, because I think if we would make that recommendation and send it back to the full council and get their approval. And then I'm thinking this is not a large fiscal ask, and so it might be something. And so I'm just curious if Courtney, Director McCombs, James, if we have any idea of the scope or amount of this for, when would we ask this for a so we don't have to come back every year? Would this be like a multi-year kind of ask? And so what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll just start real quick. So first of all, thanks for cleaning it up. And just for background, there wasn't an original appropriation associated with the administration of the council. And so when we had been meeting virtually originally, and then when we determined it was in our best interest, and certainly as it relates to our ability to be successful with our statutory duties, it'd be great for us to get together. And so we have been using Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities funds to cover those costs, and yet that probably potentially isn't sustainable. And so, we thought it'd be important to have this conversation. But as far as the actual costs to date, I don't have those off the top of my head. Courtney might be able to speak to what those are, but I'd have to ping staff. But I think that the model that we would want to potentially consider is just other advisory bodies that have appropriated funding associated with them. And there are, I'm assuming, quite a few across state government. So I think just modeling on maybe the Colorado Fire Commission or others that have been able to have those resources available to support both staffing and just the meetings themselves. The logistics is probably, I think, for the sustainability of our work in our best interest. And I think really importantly, it allows for the group to come together and continue to build relationships, build trust, as we get into the meatier and tougher issues that we'll face certainly in time. I guess to close that being said, we're going to continue to support this however we can. I mean, absent some additional resources, we'll continue to kind of scrape around and figure out ways to get us together. So that's something I remain committed to.
Well, and I think that's really wonderful. I think though it's such a small, it's not small, but Courtney, go ahead. I think you probably have some ideas of the scope of that.
Yeah, I think another reason this came up is because sort of larger projects have come into the sphere of the Forest Health Council, like the Forest Health Planning Guide. And now we're talking about having a facilitator for the 30-year visioning session in 2024. And so I think especially those larger cost projects are making us want to think about getting a budget appropriated to the council. I've been meaning to get together, with Director McCombs to think through some of the costs. And so maybe that's a first step of like staff, with James too, thinking through like, what are some of the costs for the council, looking at the models. Like I can reach out to the Fire Commission to see how they have their budget set up. But I do think, as the council continues to dream bigger and has bigger ambitions about what it wants to be doing, that a budget would be helpful in supporting those.
Mr. Morgan, I see your hands raised. Thank you.
I understand that we don't have any exact figures yet, but is there even a ballpark for what we're looking for, or what's, I know that it appears as though there's two kinds of costs here, one for the organizational and facilities and one to reimburse people. Me personally, I'm not too concerned about that, but agencies do have to cover their costs to stage events and do things, and even the time involved today. So can anybody even get me in the ballpark what you think of this, an estimate would be? Do we have a guess of any bookends?
Yeah, I would be hesitant to say anything too concrete, but maybe somewhere between, I think it would be under 100,000, like somewhere between 15 and I don't know, 60. And I think it depends on the special projects. You know, if we're putting 30,000 towards this forest health planning guide, we have to ask, do we want to do something like that every year? Do we need enough money in the budget to cover special projects every year? One special project every year. I think the travel will be pretty easy to pinpoint. And I think it would be less than $5,000, maybe just for travel. And then I think the other components are going to be the bigger uncertainties that we'll have to think through.
Thank you very much. That surprised me, but thank you very much.
Well, great. Well, really great
So-
questions. Go ahead, Director McCombs.
So I would just say, was it the sense of this group, would you like Courtney and James to work this out, come back with some preliminary figures for you to respond to? I think it could be a heck of a lot easier. So how about we commit to that?
That's what I was just going to ask was, is it the consensus of this group that we, or I was going to ask for a vote to go ahead and have Director McCombs and Courtney to come back with some line items. I'm glad you were brought about the consultant for the 30-year vision. I had forgotten about that from our meeting, but now we're looking at just even that might be $100,000 or $50,000 for some of those. And I don't know how much that pressed. So that's now kind of up that number a little bit. So I think, those kind of facilitators and helping us craft and write that is, but it's helpful. It's really helpful. I think it would help us kind of be able to do this in a short amount of time. So is it the consensus of the group to have them bring that back for our next meeting and have another discussion on this? Mr. Moore, your hand's raised again. Is that?
Yeah, just one comment there. Director McCombs, anytime, I understand when you're doing something like this, there are an incredible number of incidental costs that aren't always captured. You know, if you're doing something, you alter a lot of things, you put resources to it that you don't always keep track of. So I understand that number, if you go out and capture it, maybe it also tells you exactly what that number really is, and you didn't even know what the number was until you went looking for that process. So I just think that I find that when I host a lot of different events or do things, there's a lot of incidental costs. So it'll be a good exercise for your organization to find out what it's really costing you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's an opportunity for us to really think about how this body continues to grow in its organization and impact. So I think it'll be a good exercise. So if it's the sense of the group, we're happy to do so.
Okay, so it seems like this is James raised his hand. It seems like this consensus is, just before I have James bring this up, is there anyone who has concerns or against this this kind of consensus direction? Okay,
And
I think
we're just talking about understanding what the budget would be. We're not going to anybody and asking for money yet, right?
no, just to get an idea, and then we would craft something to take to the full Forest Health Council to approval, and then it would go from there. We've got a few steps left, so. But it's better to have, like you said, what we've all said, the numbers, the scope, and making sure we're thinking of everything so we don't have to keep tweaking. So James, you had your hand raised?
No, that discussion answered my question.
Yeah, so great. So let's move on and get unless there's anyone else that still has something to say about that. And I see Dorsey's comment in the chat. So if you want to, we need some funding for incidents. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Pat. So I think the next item is and we want to be really aware of the time. We have about 15 minutes left. So let's have a quick legislative update. And then also, James, these went before the legislative council. I'm just curious also, as you give that report, I wanted to know how they received some of these because I was watching a couple of other bills in that, and I didn't get to stay and hear about the others. So that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Before I jump into what happened this year, I wanted to give you guys a really exciting update about Senate Bill 5 from this year, I suppose. the Department of Higher Education and the community and the Commission for Community Colleges have actually finalized their letters of intent or letters of interest to see who wants to expand or start those new forestry programs. They contacted me and they have received 6 different applications. It's a very base level budget right now. So the next step that we're going towards is asking for a detailed kind of like line item plan year to year, kind of how they're going to implement that money. And we're asking for those to be sent to the Department of Higher Education by Wednesday, the 22nd. So this coming Wednesday. And then in that statute, it also says that there's going to be some coordination with the State Forest Service. So I've pulled together team members from the State Forest Service to go over those applications to see how much and which kind of letters of interest we want to fund. I don't know if I'm ready to share kind of where those 6 come from, just because I don't want to get too far ahead. And also the other good thing that I feel comfortable sharing is that the 6 letters of interest actually are coming in under what was actually appropriated for the bill. So there's a chance that we can do all of this, but we do have to kind of see what that looks like line to line and year to year. But that is it's a really big step forward for this group. And so I'm excited to see it move forward. And then regarding the what happened in Legislative Council on Wednesday, the good news is I'll just try to keep it really quick, but give you some context. The 5 bills that were actually approved by the Wildfire Matters Review Committee, those being the CSU study on biochar, we're calling it the emergency plans to include pets, and rural grant support navigator, the slash removal program, and the outreach campaign extended funding. Excuse me, I'm gonna yell at my cat really quick. All 5 of those actually passed. The CSU study on biochar and the rural grant support navigator passed 16-2. The 2 dissenting votes were from Hartsook and Armorgast. And then emergency plans, slash removal, and outreach campaign passed on a party line vote 12-6. So all 5 of those bills will be moving forward. They're probably going to be introduced at the beginning of the legislative session. Nothing changed. It's standard practice for Legislative Council to accept or reject those bills as amended or unamended. So if there is an opportunity for this group to want to engage, we can actually start that once they're introduced. The only kind of negative thing that I have for this group is that before the actual wildfire committee actually met, before they actually met, Representative Velasco actually had approved to draft one of the Forest Health Council recommendation bills. It was the collaboration bill for increased capacity funding. She didn't find enough information that she was looking for, is what she said. And so she actually pulled that bill from discussion. And so unfortunately that bill wasn't even discussed, just because she needed a little bit more information. But she says she's going to continue looking at kind of stuff like that to move forward. But I think all in all, the 5 bills that we have moving forward, I think especially Bill D, which was recommended by this group, is going to move us it's going to move us forward in this discussion. So.
Thank you, James. Real quick question for me. Did she say what kind of information she was looking for or what she needed?
I think it started as just like this really big kind of bill. It started as this collaboration between federal, state, local nonprofits, how we can then find that money. And I think it just got a little bit too big. And so as she started to narrow down, she didn't have she had too much information for the narrow bill that she was kind of looking for. And so I don't think it was that she didn't. Buddy, stop it. He didn't have enough information, but I think she has that information. It just wasn't compiled and ready to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Morgan? And I have to laugh because all of us have had toddlers or dogs. This is a new one, but we're not trying to laugh at you, James, but we so get it.
No. It's fine. He's a menace when I don't pay attention to him. He is like a child.
This question is for James. you gave us a little bit of a timeline there for the 22nd. I've had some contact from Front Range Community College. They have a great deal of demand. They would like to put these programs to work, and they're looking, excuse me, it's my cat, but they'd like to have funding. They've got things ready to go, and they have demand for next semester. So they're looking to get after this and pull the trigger. So any timeline that you could tell me would be helpful. I mean, they're very excited about this. They want to go with it. They have demand for the classes. They're full up. They can't deal with any more students. So do you have any kind of a timeline beyond this Wednesday, the 22nd?
I do have an internal timeline, and hopefully it's the one that's that we're sticking towards. It's really dependent on whether or not the Commission on Higher Education can actually get the information they need on time. So on November 22nd is when we're asking for those more detailed budgets, the line by line and the year to year. From that time on, that's going to give our team here at the Colorado State Forest Service a little over a week, and we're going to have our recommendations on those 6 letters of interest back to the Commission on Higher Education before on November 30th. From then, they're going to look at those recommendations, because on December 11th, the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, it's their December meeting. They're going to take those recommendations to their commissioners to say, this is what we want to move forward with this bill. And so at the December 11th meeting, that's when they're going to decide up or down votes on how that funding is going to get allocated. But if we do get that done in time, what the Commission on Higher Education tells me and DHE tells me is that money should be ready to go for the spring semester.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's really great news. Really great news. Okay, exciting stuff. And that was a question I was going to ask. So you answered already. So looking at the time and going into our next agenda item, unless someone has some other questions, we can always ask them again next time, or you can send emails to Courtney and she can find answers for us as we go forward. So looking at, like I said, watching the time, we're looking at our next meeting, which would be, I think that's our next agenda item, correct, Courtney? I'm sorry, I've got like 5 screens up trying to answer questions on this legislative session. So is that the next one? Is our next meeting?
First is our next meeting, December 1st.
Yep.
Is that what you're
So,
asking?
yeah, and so just for agenda items, we had kind of a queue of items and discussions. Do you remember what we had for the next one? Because we had already, like a couple of meetings ago, had like 4 or 5 big topics that everyone wanted to.
I need to double check again, either Director Gibbs or Director Morgan. We were hoping one of them would be able to come and either talk about the Federal Fire Commission or the Colorado Fire Commission report out on those 2 groups. So I will double check to see if they're still available on the 1st.
That would be great. And then I guess we can just continue to have legislative updates and then talk about this bill. So we'll, any other big items or discussions? All right, well, let's thank you, Director McCombs. I look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. Let's go ahead and give everybody back 5 minutes today. And also just want to wish you all a very wonderful Thanksgiving. And again, thank you all for being here today. I think it was a great conversation and a great discussion, and obviously very excited to hear about the progress. And we appreciate all of you and your service. We have a really great group that shows up every 2 weeks, and we just really appreciate your time. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I
So moved. I'll
I would
second.
take those a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanksgiving, everyone.